This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back to North Pod. We are here. It's finally the season. We're back for our first game review of the year, and I think that game probably went about as well as we could have hoped. We'll unpack the game against the Giants across the episode, but we're back to a pretty regularish format with a couple of changes for 2024. Let's call them upgrades. I've been in the lab. We've fixed a few things up. We've tinkered with a few things. So, I think it should be a relatively positive episode. But those of you that are regular listeners probably also know that I'm not super optimistic. Generally speaking, I tend to be pretty grounded, or at least try to be. So, look, we'll see where the episode takes us. I think, going into the game, it was pretty universal that the Giants, they're premiership contenders, so it was going to be a tough game. I don't think there was anyone that was thinking that we were going to go in, and cruise to victory, which certainly did not happen. I think there was a variety of feelings in terms of we're going to get smashed or we just need to be competitive. And I think we were mostly competitive. I did want to just start with team selection, in terms of how I felt going into the game. I don't know if this is something I'm going to do each week. It was more a talking point because it was the first team selection of the year, so there's always a bit more to talk about. So Coleman Jones did get selected. There was a big push from, some fans for Greenwood to be selected, and I probably, I fell into that. I was really thinking that potentially Coleman Jones might just need to go back and get some form. We'll talk about how that ended up looking, but Coleman Jones did get picked. I was really surprised that Wilfield did not get selected in the midfield. So they went with Lazaro and Powell and Tucker. Sheezel also picked as sub, so Wilfield not an emergency. I think he probably wasn't an emergency because they wanted to get a full VFL game into him, not worry about potentially being a game day sub. So that part doesn't bother me so much as the fact that he wasn't picked. And maybe bothers the wrong word. I was just a bit surprised. I thought there would have been room for him. Potentially as that smaller body, they thought they'd go, with some pace with Lazaro, and Powell's slightly bigger, so coming up against the GWS, that potentially that was the thinking, or maybe it was just, he hadn't earned his spot over the pre-season. I'm not too sure, but that did surprise me a little bit. Core and Ford came in as the sort of players that hadn't played senior football in the pre-season due to injury, and I think Core was definitely one that I thought needed to come in terms of experience in the back line. And Pink did get the spot over Biggie Newen, or that third defender spot. We knew that Dawson was going to get a game. We thought that Core, if there was a chance to play, he'd play, and Pink did play over Biggie, which I think given the size of the Giants forward line, it made sense to get Pink in. Biggie's a taller player, but Pink's a bigger, tougher, more seasoned body. So anyway, just I guess it was good to get that out there. I think I'd be surprised if we see wholesale changes on the back of one game. I wouldn't expect Clarko to be that brash, but it will be interesting to see. As we talk about more of the game, we'll certainly unpack how well that Coleman Jones selection went, and so on and so forth. We'll talk all about it. So now I'll jump into the match. If you did miss it, it was the Giants 121 defeating us 82, so a 39-point loss for us. And it was just a sort of steady... They chipped away at the lead, the Giants, and eventually it did get out to 40-odd points. The scoreboard probably flattered us. They kicked 17-19, so a little bit inaccurate, and we kicked 13-4, so super accurate. I think probably the scoring shot differential flatters the Giants a little bit. I think the truth was probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, it certainly is worth noting that they did kick, 19 points. In terms of the story of the game, I think, really no surprise here, but the GWS transition and their ability to just handball their way through the middle of the ground, spread from stoppage, was the difference all day. Tom Green, Steve Coniglio, Whitfield, Kelly, Finn Callahan, they really just did as they pleased in transition. I think all of those players had either equal kicks to handball or had more handballs than kicks, and they just ran and handballed and overlapped really all day. We really struggled to put a glove on them or a significant glove on them through the midfield when they were transitioning from their defensive 50. Their spread from congestion was way more damaging than us. There wasn't that many ball ups around the ground or boundary throw-ins. It was just stoppages in the middle, but whilst we won the clearances, I thought that their movement away from stoppage was much more dangerous than ours. Our poor, inexperienced defence just didn't stand a chance with the way the ball was moving. And so many times, particularly, you looked at the first quarter, Jake Riccardi kicked 3 goals just because we kept getting smashed through the middle, and he was the player that we were sort of zoning off to try and put that pressure on up the ground, which did not end up working because the ball just got there too quickly, and Pink or Dawson were sort of made to look silly because Riccardi was free, but that wasn't really their fault. It did make life really hard for those young defenders down there. We know obviously Sheezel's down there, McKercher, Pink, Callan Dawson, and then we had Core, who in the first quarter spent about 15 minutes off anyway because he'd gotten a cut eyebrow. So yeah, it was really tough going for the defenders because of the way the ball was moving. I thought that Sheezel and Dawson were probably the best down back. And I'll talk about the two of them in a little bit. It was the midfield pressure and defensive running that was a worry for me. I thought our defensive running patterns they didn't stop GWS. They made it look way too easy. And yeah, I think we knew this was going to be a problem. This is not a massive surprise. It's not something where we go, we have to completely change the game plan. But that being said, because it's a known problem, I think we're going to want to see some growth with that as the year goes on. I'd say the Giants are probably going to be one of the best sides in terms of their ball movement this year, so it's not a massive blight to be smashed by them, but it's an obvious area of improvement, and that's definitely where the difference in the game was. Just their ball movement and run and overlap was so much better than ours. We weren't able to create that run and overlap that we have been able to in the preseason games. It was much more stagnated ball movement. And sure, our transition play was better than it's been in previous years, but it wasn't North ball. We rarely saw North ball today, I would say. Wardlaw was probably our best defensive runner and effort giver in the midfield. He had a couple of really good efforts that did impact the GWS's ability to transition, but yeah, by and large, they just really smashed us in that area of the game, and I thought that was probably the difference maker. I'll transition into the 5 stars of the game. This is, of course, the first edition of the North Podium. It's a cross between Podium and Pod. So it's our year-long, essentially best and fairest award. I'll give out 4-3-2-1 for North Melbourne, and then a best opposition player. And then, we'll tally that through the year and find out who ends up on top of the North Podium. I thought today the 4 votes had to go to Tristan Xerri. Just dominated the ruck. 18 disposals, 19 hit-outs, 9 tackles, 8 clearances, 5 marks. 2 of them were contested. He went at 83% disposal efficiency, kicked a goal. I thought after probably a slower first quarter, he really got on top later on in the game and, made Briggs look a little silly at times and was also able to have an impact around the ground. As I said, he kicked that goal, took a couple of important marks around the ground. And 5 marks, whilst, that's not an amazing total, in terms of what he was providing last year, the 5 marks and the 2 contested marks, is a really positive sign. One of those, his mark inside 50, which allowed him to kick the goal, it was one of those ones that bobbled. He still does need to work on his first touch, but look, I digress. I thought he had a fantastic game. Really, really fantastic contested work. Those 9 tackles were really hard tackles, and he was also super disciplined. He didn't give away pushing the back or holding the man free kicks. I don't think he had a free against all game. He was, really, really influential, and was one of the major reasons that we actually were able to win the clearances throughout the match. So I thought, he was a pretty clear best on for me. 3 votes LDU, probably our best. Well, he was our best midfielder. 29 disposals, 6 tackles, 8 clearances, 2 goal assists, 5 inside 50s. And he was back to his smooth moving best. Had a couple of really good side steps. Both he and Sheezel have some really good side steps, and made the Giants look silly at times. Offensively, at least, I do think that he's got some work to do. Defensively, there was a moment, I reckon it was in the third quarter, but look, certainly in the middle part of the game, where Cornelio and he and LDU were pretty much next to each other. The ball sort of spilt out from a clearance, and Cornelio just ran forward, and almost it looked like LDU was stationary, like Cornelio just took off. And I wouldn't say that Cogs is the fastest midfielder. Obviously he's got some wheels, but I'd say he's a grunt worker kind of player. And I think that's just an example of what LDU needs to add in terms of the layers of his game. I really do think that the next part of his development is the defensive side. He's one of the reasons that our defensive pressure lacks a little bit in the midfield. And I know that, typically the star offensive midfielders, you can kind of give them a bit of a leeway on defense, but I don't think we have that luxury at the moment. We just don't have enough other defensive runners through the middle. So anyway, this is the classic me going negative. It should be positive. I thought he had a pretty good game, LDU. We know what he can do. He had, as I said, he had the 8 clearances. He did tackle quite well when the ball was in tight. It's just when the ball spreads that I worry about his pressure. And I did think that he lowered his eyes a couple of times, didn't blaze away as much as he sometimes has been known to do. So I thought he was definitely our best midfielder. Callan Dawson is getting the 2 votes. Whilst the defense obviously conceded 17 goals, I thought he had a really promising game. I thought he influenced most contests that he was near. He had 15 disposals, 7 marks, 6 intercept possessions, 4 spoils. But we know that, stats like that don't tend to reflect, the impact of a key defender. And I thought, he really showed that certainly he's right now our number 1 key defensive option. I think whilst Jesse Hogan did get off the leash a bit and kick 6, and like I said earlier, Jake Riccardi kicked 3 the first quarter, I think there wasn't a lot that Dawson could have done about that. It was really a lot about the way the ball was moving into the GWS forward line. The keys weren't awful, I didn't think, and Dawson, I think, was definitely our best key defender. He also has that ability to, run and pick up a ball and go for a bit of a run, and he does have a fairly penetrating kick on him too, which, is a bonus. I think he probably brings a lot of the same stuff that Ben Mackay did. I think that Mackay is and will be a better intercept mark, but I do think that Dawson's got some really good defensive habits, I suppose. And I thought it was a really promising game for him. The ball just kept coming in, and he really gave his all day. And then it was tough to pick my 1 vote. I've given it to Sheezel, 32 disposals, 9 marks, 7 intercept possessions, 4 inside 50s, went at 90% disposal efficiency, and 755 metres gained, which was by far the most on the ground. That's a massive, massive amount. The only thing that was interesting, sort of looking back at his stats, was he only had one score involvement. Now, that's obviously not all his fault, and part of that's because he's getting the ball so, deep in defence that he's kind of relying on other players to finish off his work. But I do think it's worth remembering that he is getting a lot of those disposals fairly cheaply in the back line, but what he's doing with that, I think, is pretty special at times. And like I said about LDU, he had a fantastic step on him at times, Sheezel. So, yeah, look, I think he had a very good game in terms of drive. I would have loved to see a bit more overlap. And, he was definitely the best of our distributors from the back line. But I also wouldn't have said it was his best game in terms of impact. I think he was a great accumulator and did some great defensive stuff, but offensively, he probably just didn't quite have the impact that we needed. Again, I gave him one vote, so he had a good game. No slight on him. It was more around, what we were doing up the ground. And I just thought, Paul Curtis was pretty unlucky. He had a really quiet game stats-wise, but he kicked 2 goals, should have had 3 because Eddie Ford missed him with an absolute Joe the Goose over the top. It was a shocker of a shank from Eddie Ford. And Curtis also had 3 goal assists, a couple of marks, 1 contested mark. I just think every time he was near it, we pretty much scored. So yeah, he was very close. Probably if he gets that goal from Ford, it's hard to deny him the 1 star. He did give away an unlucky 50-metre penalty. I reckon he overstepped the mark by about 40 centimetres. It was pretty rough. Wasn't asked even to go back. Anyway, he scored immediately after that, so made up for it for essentially giving away a free goal to the Giants. And yeah, I was super impressed. Only the 9 touches, I think it was, but yeah, super impactful with the touches that he had. And just wanted to give him a shout out. His pressure was also pretty good. So they're ours. Curtis unlucky to miss on a vote. And I think in terms of the best opposition player, I mean, pretty tough to split Tom Green and Jesse Hogan. So I won't. I'll just list them both because I can. Tom Green, 37 disposals, kicked a goal, 5 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 14 score involvements. So absolute ball in the midfield. I think he's probably my Brownlow pick, and for whatever that's worth, it's round 1, but he was unstoppable. His handball and his strength through tackle was fantastic, and he was virtually unstoppable all game. I think the only player that was really able to halt him was Tristan Xerri when he put on a massive tackle. Besides that, we just didn't have a midfielder that could go with him. He's such a special player. He's that special mix of 190 odd centimeters, but can run, so strong, so agile, so skillful. He was unstoppable in the midfield. But Jesse Hogan kicked 6 goals too in that forward line. He did kick him when the game was in play. He only kicked 1 in the last quarter when the game was over. 18 disposals, 8 marks, 5 of those were contested. Had 3 goal assists on top of that. So yeah, between the two of them, they both had a massive impact on the game. Pretty hard to split them. So yeah, I'd say those two were best on for the Giants. It's just crazy to think. I think Hogan's got 10 now from the first 2 games. It's crazy to think that when he was playing at Freo a couple of years ago, it kind of looked like his career was at a crossroads, and now he's dominating for the Giants and looking really, really in form this year. So we'll transition into the positives and the negatives. Before I do that, just a plea, an ask to share the podcast North Pod with any North Melbourne fans that you know. It's obviously the start of the year and there's some positivity around despite the loss. So please help me get the word out, help grow the North Pod community. If there's any North Melbourne fans in your life, please share the podcast with them. And subscribe on your chosen podcast service if you can. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm happy to give you a shout out or a rating on Spotify. It'd be beautiful too. Get involved with my social media accounts at NorthPod Show. And if you are interested in supporting me and supporting the show, you can look up the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. It's just a way to keep the lights on and support the show. So no pressure, but really appreciate all the support that I've gotten so far. All right, let's jump into the negatives. This is where I like to start, and it's generally pretty easy to start here after a loss, which, if you're a fan of the podcast and a fan of North Melbourne, you'd be all too familiar with that feeling. I think, we're 20-odd minutes in. It's definitely time to address the elephant in the room, and that was Josh Goda's injury. A really sour way to finish the game. Only 5 or 6 minutes left in the last quarter. A really innocuous incident. He just changed direction as the ball was heading into our defensive 50, and he's snapped his Achilles. It has been confirmed by the club after the game that it is a ruptured Achilles. So yeah, that's the last we'll see of him this year, which is such a shame. He had a really promising preseason. I thought he was pretty close to best on against the Saints in that last practice game. And yeah, now he's going to spend, 12 odd months on the sidelines. Just such a shame. I thought he'd had a pretty decent game on Toby Green at times. He had a couple of incidences where he'd sort of got out-muscled when he found himself on bigger players and gave away some free kicks. But offensively, he'd brought a bit. I thought, he'd had a solid enough game. And as I said, had been in pretty good form. And yeah, just a heartbreaking, really gut-wrenching injury. It's just one of those things that happens in footy. Can happen to anyone, anywhere. I think, there's an element of being fatigued late in the game and you try and change directions quickly. And yeah, you could just tell right away that it looked like an Achilles. It's one of those ones where he grabbed, the base of his heel there. Yeah, just really, really, really saddening. We know he's had injury troubles last year. I don't know if it's the same leg, and it's not really relevant. It's a different area of concern. He'd had a lot of knee trouble, but yeah, he'll certainly miss the rest of the year. I guess the only real positive is that we do have some halfbacks waiting in the wings like Bergman and Luke McDonald, for example. It is an area that we've got some depth in. But yeah, it's certainly not the way that you want to be, testing your depth. And yeah, just had real Charlie Comben from last year vibes about it. Obviously different type of injury, but you got the sense that it was that level of seriousness. So hopefully Josh can make a quick recovery and, we can see him early next year. I'm sure the club will look after him, but yeah, just a real sour way to end the game after what had been, a relatively positive game despite the loss. I think -2, I sort of talked about it in terms of the midfield dominance of the Giants, but they also just really dominated the contested elements of the game. We lost the contested possessions 145 to 113, so that's a smashing really in contested possessions to lose it by 32. We lost the contested marks 22 to 7, so lost that by 15. Again, a smashing. Interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, we did win the clearances, but that was mostly due to Xerri's dominance in the ruck, not our midfielders dominating in contested possession areas. I think Xerri had 8 clearances himself. And yeah, it was just, we really, once the ball hit the ground from the ruck, unless it had gone straight to one of our players, it was tough going. And yeah, around the ground in contested ball situations, the Giants just really ragdolled us at times. It was, tough to watch in some elements. It certainly wasn't through a lack of effort. I don't think you could accuse the boys of that. We did win the tackle count by 2 in the end, 47 to 45. I think at halftime we led that by double figures. We had a really good, aggressive first half, but yeah, it was just, I guess, the impact. I think often we were tackling, but GWS were able to still get disposals away, whereas it wasn't necessarily the case for us. And I thought we put on a lot of pressure, but yeah, they were very clearly bigger bodies than us. We knew that going in. But it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So that, I guess, My only concern here is that, the midfield is supposed to be an area that we've got some relative strength in, and LGU had a good game, Tristan Xerri had a good game. Outside of that, it was pretty slim pickings in the midfielders. I thought we were somewhere between solid and bad. Wardlaw, as I mentioned earlier, I thought he tackled well and was great in contested scenarios. He did generate some scores from his tackling. There was an example where I can't remember who he tackled, but he put on a fantastic tackle in the middle of the ground, which turned it over for us. Resulted in, I reckon, the ball spilt out to Lazaro maybe, Tom Powell, I think, and then Tom Powell got a handball over to Lazaro, who ended up kicking it to Ford, who kicked truly. So, there were some examples of our pressure and our contested work coming out positively, but there was certainly lots of examples of where the Giants would just get out of a contested scenario, spread, and away they went. So, yeah, definitely some work to do there in terms of our contested work. And I think the other big elephant in the room, if I'm talking my third negative here, just a lack of marking options up forward. A massive problem. Again, this is something that's super familiar to us. It's not a surprising or a new problem, but we really struggled for options except for Larkey. We know that Sam Taylor and Buckley and Himmelberg are fantastic defenders, so, expectations going into the game were set, at a acceptable level. We knew what we were coming up against. But yeah, to lose the inside 50 marking 25-9, I think is a massive reflection of how much we struggled once the ball got to sort of 60 or 7 metres out from goal. CCJ was a talking point going in, and I thought he actually started the game pretty well, had a couple of good contests, but then was basically a statue after that. He was subbed out in the third quarter with 6 disposals, 3 marks and 4 hit-outs. And if you can believe this, negative 12 metres gained. So that left Xerri to do some rucking in the fourth quarter. It's going to be interesting to see how long CCJ's persisted with. I can't see a scenario where he gets the first game and then doesn't get a couple to show what he can do, particularly given I know that he has had an interrupted pre-season on the back of his concussion issues last season. I think he was only getting into contact work sometime in February. So, look, I'm sure that he'll get more chances, but he really didn't look like it today, which is, unfortunate because that's what he looked like through most of the pre-season as well. I don't know if Greenwood's really a viable option, but, he would have brought more in some other areas today. He certainly would have been able to tackle well, and he would have provided at least an aerial option, but I don't think, Buckley, Himmelberg and Taylor aren't going to let him get away with much either. I also think it's just worth remembering that he's going to be practically useless on the spread too. Greenwood is a real Cunnington-type player. He's not quick. So once the ball gets away from his area, he's rendered pretty much useless. We know he's a fantastic contested player and a fantastic tackler when the ball's in tight, but I worry about what the Giants would have done to him today on the spread. So yeah, look, it's just worth noting. We know that Duursma is going to be a fantastic mark, and I'll talk about him in a minute. He took a few nice grabs. Larkey did what he could. But besides the two of them, it was really hard to generate marks inside 50. I think Xerri had one, Paul Curtis had one, Eddie Ford had one. Against the Giants midfield, we found it really hard to, generate really quick inside 50s that gave our forwards the best chance. But I just thought that our forwards, they weren't getting themselves in positions to mark it well either. So yeah, that's the main negatives. Just a couple of other stray thoughts. Zach Fisher, I thought, really struggled to impact the game today. Got found out several times defensively, either because he fumbled it or just got out muscled in contests. So yeah, hopefully he'll bounce back next week. We know that he was really looking good in the preseason. He wasn't able to get that run and carry game going today, so he was a negative. I thought Liam Shields, when he came on as the sub, was really uncharacteristically sloppy when he came on. Did end up kicking a goal in the fourth quarter, but yeah, I was just a little bit surprised to see him fumbling it. And in general being a bit unsure with the ball. I expected him to come on and, whilst he wasn't going to win us the game or be a massive game changer, I thought he'd come on and be solid. That's what he's in the team for, to be a kind of reliable midfielder, but hopefully he was just blowing the cobwebs out. And yeah, the last one, as I said, the scoring shot differential, massive, and probably tells a bit of a different story to the final score. It was probably more like a 50 to 60 point loss, what we should have suffered. But anyway, that's, the scoreboard is the scoreboard. GWS were a little inaccurate. We were super accurate. So we were a little fortunate to be as close as we were. But let's have a look at the positives, because there certainly were some positives to take away from this game. I've mentioned him several times already, but Xerri just allowed us to win the clearances. He had a massive game. We won the clearances 32-27, despite the midfielders, aside from Davies Uniacke, not having fantastic games. Xerri he was just big everywhere. He marked it. He had clearances. He did make one error when he spoiled. We were kicking out of defensive 50, and he was in a big pack, sort of 60 metres out from the GWS goal, and he spoiled it about 30 metres towards the Giants' goal and towards the middle of the ground, which, wasn't great. But aside from that, I think that's a bit of a ruckman mistake, as it were. Aside from that, I think he had a really good game. If we're able to find someone who could, ruck 2 or 3 contests per quarter and just give him a chop out, and he's able to stay fit, I think we've got a really capable ruckman, someone that can, ruck for us for the next 3 or 4 years whilst Taylor Goad's biding his time in the VFL and hopefully developing into, a fantastic ruckman. That's certainly what we drafted him for. But for right now, I think, the club's faith in Xerri is looking like it's in a good space. I was worried that we'd get him in an AFL game and things might change. But, he was best on for mine. So a really disciplined game by him. And, if he could, provide sort of 70 to 80% of this every game, I'll be stoked. He gave our midfielders a fairly good service. Whilst the hit-out count was pretty level, I thought that he dominated in terms of his impact around the ground and also his impact, in clearance situations. So, I'm so pleased for Xerri that he was able to put it together in an AFL game. Probably, I would say, his best AFL game. Another positive, Duursma and McKercher both had really promising first games. I don't think either of them, necessarily starred, but Duursma took a couple of great marks, kicked 2 goals. He's got that real ability to just float across the front of the pack and take a mark, which I'm sure will get harder for him as teams sort of find out how to play on him. But there's a couple of times where he just seems to drift in sort of unopposed, and he's just got that knack for taking a mark at the real highest point in the air where it's pretty hard to defend it. He looked great, kicked 2 goals. We know that he playing a really hard position, so there's going to be days where he struggles for impact. He was certainly not a high possession player, but if he's able to bob up for a couple of goals a week, he's going to develop really nicely. Colby McKercher looked really agile, looked like a great decision maker. He looked like what we'd seen in the preseason. I didn't think his game against the Saints was fantastic. I thought he was a bit sloppy with his disposal, but he was really, really great today. He had 22 disposals. You could just see the two of them being sort of top 10 players in our team by the end of the year. They're both sublime talents. That's why they were taken so high. He looked super agile. He had a couple of fantastic evasive manoeuvres today, McKercher. And I think he's going to learn a lot playing on those dangerous small and medium opposition forwards. He did spend some time on Toby Green today and wasn't embarrassed. I don't think we could say that he beat Toby Green by any stretch, because Green had 20-odd touches, kicked 4 points, so he could have had a really damaging game. Look, McKercher didn't spend the whole time on him. It was, a bit of his own responsibility, but I think playing on players like Toby Green is going to be a fantastic apprenticeship for him this year. And then we can see, with both him and Sheezel back there, you'd think long term that either one or both of them will move out of there. We know that McKercher, he was drafted as a midfielder. It's an area of the ground that we've got plenty of depth, but long term you'd think that's where he's going to end up. So, yeah, super fantastic that we could get their debuts out of the way. Toby Pink, who I haven't touched on much, also debuted, and I thought he was serviceable. Certainly not up to the standards of the other two, but considering the amount of ball that was coming in, I thought he had put up a pretty good effort in defence as well. I think he had 7 spoils. Not a bad game from Pink. I didn't think, at least, considering the amount of ball and the ferocity with which it was coming in. Another positive, Cam Xerri went into the middle in the second half and, showed that he's capable of making an impact. He only kicked 1 goal for the game, but in that third quarter, he spent a fair bit of time in the middle, had 10 disposals. Also helped out in the ruck when Coleman Jones was subbed out sort of late in the third quarter. Xerri was able to make an influence on a couple of ruck contests in the last quarter and give Tristan a cop-out. Not a cop-out. What's the word I'm looking for? A chop-out is what I'm looking for. Forgot the H. That's what we'll need him to do at times when the ball's not getting to him. We'll need him to go into the middle and give us a bit of something. We didn't see that in the preseason, which was interesting, but we know he can do it now. He's not going to be as smooth with the ball as others when the ball's in tight. I think he went at 55 disposal efficiency today, so 55% that is. You kind of know what you're going to get from him. He's going to go in there with strength and power. He's going to put his head over the ball and put his body through players pretty fairly. So, I think it was great to be able to use him in that way, particularly given we were getting bullied a bit around the ball. And it's good to see that we've got that option for him. He did kick a goal, but aside from that, he'd had a pretty quiet first half for his 100th game. So, I thought it was positive to see him go in there and that we're going to at least try that at times. And then the last sort of main positive, I thought at times we really matched them for firepower. We just didn't have the defensive prowess to keep it up all game. As I said, our accuracy kept us in it because we really struggled to convert those inside 50s to scores. Our efficiency inside 50 was 39% compared to 62 for the Giants. So, a big 20% or 23% difference there. We were scoring goals when we scored, but the Giants were just scoring, 3 out of 5 times that it went in. So it's pretty hard to win games of footy when the disparity in efficiency is that bad. We did a pretty good job of getting it to our forward 50 or 60, but it was, our ability to put a damaging inside 50 or realistically get the ball there fast enough to do so was the difference. But as I said, I really do think that we matched their offensive power at times, and whilst they didn't let us play the way that we wanted to, we were able to adapt a little bit. Just some stray positives. I thought, our forward pressure from Curtis and Stevo and Larky was pretty good. Not elite, but solid. We'll need to bring that and more in the future. But as I said, I thought for a starting point, it was pretty solid. It's something that was a problem last year, and I think anyone in the VFL that is able to put some elite forward pressure on is likely to get a game because, locking that ball inside 50 is, something that we need to work on. I thought, as I just mentioned before, we were able to move the ball a few different ways, and even though the Giants didn't allow us to get that overlapping handball going, I thought we adjusted to what they gave us. So at times we played a bit slower, but it wasn't kicking backwards. It was sort of diagonal 15, 20 metre kicks that are at least vaguely forwards and, testing their defence a little bit. We were extremely patient, I thought, in the last quarter in particular, in terms of just controlling the ball and not bombing it long unless we absolutely had to, or unless we got it to sort of 70 to 80 metres out from goal. So, I thought some positive, mature signs with our offensive game. It's just that defensive pressure that we're going to need to work on. because we know we're going to concede some scores this year, but considering it was against the Giants today, I thought we did a pretty serviceable job. And look, wrapping the positives up, I just think it was a solid first game. I would have loved it to be maybe 2 or 3 goals closer. You could probably say it was a bit of a moral victory if that was the case, but a 39-point loss probably speaks to where we're at. If we are saying that the Giants are, grand finalists potentially this year, I think losing by 6.5 goals to a team of that ilk is fair enough and probably a good reflection of where we are. Yeah, it was just great to see us eliminate, for the most part, those horrific back half turnovers, which have killed us the last couple of years. We really didn't have too many of them at all. That's it for the game review. We'll now move into a bit of a look at the VFL hit-out, which happened today, and also a quick look ahead to next week's game. I haven't watched the VFL. It was an intra-club practice match, so mostly it was the AFL players that didn't get a game and playing the rest of the VFL side. It wasn't streamed, so I'm just going off the AFL website's review of the game. It was their last hit out. They've got their first match next week, so they will be able to see some proper stats and some proper streams of the VFL moving forward. But based on what I've read, it seemed as though Common was pretty good, so potentially he's someone that could replace Pink, who was serviceable. But Common, another good game, ramping up for his defensive transition. Potentially even Aiden Core is someone that Common could replace. I think Core is in if he's fit. He's in the leadership group, so I think Core plays, but potentially Toby Pink is someone that Common could replace. So it sounds like he had a solid game. Tyler Sellers kicked 6 goals, so really putting some pressure on the selectors for the short term, as did Hugh Greenwood, who kicked 3. So there are some forward options there. We know that Sellers probably lacks the height to play that backup ruck, but that's what Xerri did in the last quarter. I'd say that he lacks that height too. So it might just be that we have to really concede a couple of hit outs per game and try and do a little bit extra at ground level. Anyway, so Sellers kicked 6, which is promising. Cooper Harvey also kicked 4, but we know that it's probably his defensive work that's likely keeping him out. We know that he can hit the scoreboard. So, another positive outing from him. And then the rest of the players, as I've said earlier, I think you've got to take what the AFL website VFL review says with a bit of a grain of salt. It did mention other players, but probably less glowingly. So it talked about McDonald and Wilfield, Curtis Taylor and Jackson Archer, Riley Hardiman. It did mention them and talked about some positive things, but it sounds as though that Comben, Sellers, Greenwood and Cooper Harvey were probably best on in terms of potential AFL players for next week. It also mentioned Biggie Newen had a bit of a knee knock and went off late. I'm not sure if that's too serious or not, but if we were looking to swap out Pink for a Biggie instead of a Comben, and there's potentially a bit of a niggle there that could cause a bit of trouble. But as I said earlier in the podcast, I don't expect there to be too many changes besides the obvious one with Goda, who's going to be out injured for the rest of the year now. In terms of next week's game, I may as well transition to that now. We will be playing Fremantle. It's a Saturday afternoon game, 1:45. First game at Marvel, and I think this is absolutely a winnable game for us. I know it's dangerous to say things like that, and I'm not expecting that we'll win, but I think having Freo travel all the way over here, we know that we play really well at Marvel relative to how we play at other venues. And it's just a fantastic opportunity up first. Several of our young players playing their first games in front of a home crowd. I think there's real potential there. So we've got to put in a good shift. There's Sean Darcy's out at the moment with injury, so that presents Xerri with another opportunity to have some real influence in the middle of the ground, but we'll need to get those midfielder selections right. I think the rest of our mids, besides LDU, weren't fantastic today. I do think that Clarko will give, those midfielders a couple of weeks to gel and give them a bit of a chance, but Lazaro wasn't fantastic today. I thought he was probably, the worst of the mids. I didn't love Tucker's game either. That being said, I certainly prefer him on a wing as compared to halfback. I don't think either of them had really bad games, but they weren't influential. Particularly Lazaro got bullied around the ball a little bit, which has been a common problem for him with his size and his build. But yeah, I think and I assume that Clarko will give them, a couple of weeks to gel. Coleman Jones wasn't great, as I said, and Toby Pink was probably the defender that's most at risk. Whilst Fisher didn't have a good game, I don't expect that he'll be replaced. So with Goda being the only certainty to go out, it certainly opens the door for Luke McDonald if he's deemed fit. Miller Bergman was an emergency, so he's probably the other one that would be a chance to replace Goda. So yeah, there'll be at least one change. I do wonder if they're wanting for someone like Liam Shields to back up and play sub, or if he's going to get full-time minutes at AFL or VFL level. I'm not too sure what the plan is with him. I think Hugh Greenwood would be a really good sub just in terms of his flexibility. So, yeah, there's some options there. You'd have to think that when McDonald is fit that he plays based on the fact that he's the co-captain and we're without Jai Simpkin, who obviously will come straight back in if he's available. I'm sure they'll take a really cautious approach with him, but yeah, he'll definitely be in if he's available. So hopefully he is. If he's not, that's fine. Let's make sure we get him right because he's had those several concussions in recent years, and we want to make sure that that's not something that we have to worry about or that he has to worry about in the long term. But that's about all I've got in terms of the preview. Obviously, it's a long way away, so yeah, hopefully we can put up a positive performance against the Dockers because, yeah, I think we've had a really positive preseason. We played okay today whilst still losing by 40-odd points. So hopefully we can take that positive momentum into the Freo game and put on a good show for the Melburnian members. That's going to do it for the podcast. Really appreciate your support and you listening all the way through this first episode or first review episode of the year. Thanks for jumping on board for this year. I'm super excited for the podcast for this year. It's going to be a really, really great year. Got my first full year at it. I've got all the training that I need to out of last year. It was a fantastic training year for me and finding out year, as coaches like to say. So yeah, it was getting it stuck in and hopefully the boys can win a couple more games this year and, give us some positive things to talk about. Yeah, that's going to do it. I hope everyone has a fantastic week. Make sure you tell all your North Melbourne supporters to get there to Marvel Stadium. We know that playing an interstate side, often the crowd's a little smaller. So on one hand, that can mean that you can have a great seat, but on the other hand, it can diminish the atmosphere at times. So hopefully we can all get along. And yeah, I will speak to you soon after that game next week. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.